watching rather an interview on YouTube, and a gentleman said, if I could just get high school students to realize that the way Martin Luther King was is the equivalent of Frederick Douglass in his time, which rocked me a little bit. So to get a sense of the gravitas of the character, I watched some orators, mainly from the civil rights era, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X specifically. It's interesting because, like, Martin Luther King, he spoke in a very very succinct, specific tone, and he chose his words carefully. Same thing with Malcolm X. They didn't waste language. They were aware of the power of what they said, and in being selective with what they said, they held a great deal of authority in situations where it looks like they wouldn't. I remember seeing an interview, Meet the Press, actually, with Dr. Martin Luther King, and he was getting questioned by different newspapers, like the New York Times, and et cetera, et cetera. And he would receive these questions that said, you know, why are you encouraging African Americans to break laws? Because in doing the sit-ins, they're breaking local laws, because if the owner of an establishment says, get out, you need to get out. What he's saying, what Dr. Martin Luther King was saying was, with the sit-ins, you know, you stay there and you don't act violently. And they said, they were like, why are you encouraging them to break laws? Is this not bad? And you say that you don't want this hostility. Your goal is for there to be an understanding. He said, they were like, how are you achieving this understanding when you're asking them to break laws? And Dr. Martin Luther King composed himself, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, in the laws of the nation, the Constitution, there are laws. And by breaking these laws, we're actually enforcing these laws. The specificity of Douglass, his actions and his speech. I generally, as a performer, I can be erratic and passionate but unfocused. And one of the difficult things with Frederick Douglass, and something that Harrison is challenging me to do, and that I'm trying my best to do, the choice that I'm trying to make, is to be specific in what I say and what I do. My movements being selective, the words that I choose being chosen, getting across the ideas, knowing what I'm trying to say, because there is no wasted language, none of it. It's all specific and it's all purposeful, and making sure that I'm looking to see that it lands, and not just glossing over things and reciting speeches, because it's really easy with a Frederick Douglass speech to recite it, and you recite it, and it's, you know, they're words, but it's different to recite them on a surface level. It's different. It's one thing to recite them on a surface level. It's another thing to have them filtered through your soul and spoken in that way, and have them colored with your experiences, and trusting that you're doing a service to the spirit of Frederick Douglass, that you're doing a service to the spirit of your forefathers, the people that have fought so hard for freedom. With Jim, with Jim, it's not as difficult to find Jim, because I can use a lot more of myself. I feel. Um, and there's some circumstances, plus Jim is immediately interacting with Huck, which also helps. Frederick doesn't immediately interact with anyone else in the show. He's not speaking directly to Huck in communication with him. He doesn't have a partner in that way. But Jim does, and he has something that he's trying to get from his partner. One thing that's also really interesting is that Jim and Frederick have a lot of the same objectives. They're both teachers. Just as Jim is teaching Huck, Frederick is teaching society. And it's almost like Huck is a shadow type of society. And they parallel each other. He's unaware of the racial lens in his society because of his youth. He's brought up, and it's just the way he sees things. A lot of, just like if Huck is that shadow type for us, a lot of us are unaware of this racial lens that we look through society. And it's not until it's confronted and exposed and said, by the way that you're seeing the world, that's a lens. You're affected by how you were taught. And in doing that, and Huck is a parallel of us, and Jim, as a teacher, is a parallel of Frederick, who is a teacher, which is really interesting. And they both believe in something beyond themselves, which I think is very interesting. It's really cool. It's really cool, and it's a blessing to be able to be a part of it. I mean, I feel really privileged and honored because KSU has put such a push behind it. There's a lot of support, and it's a story that needs to be told. So it's really cool to be a part of that in motion. Yeah. It's going to be. I did a tour at my old school. It was children's theater. Mm-hmm. So the subject matter wasn't as volatile. So it's going to be very different going into schools and calling people out and showing them, telling them this story, which indicts our history. But I think it's going to be extremely worthwhile. It will be. I knew when this project started that it was going to be one of the most difficult things that I've done as a performer, and as a person, honestly. But I think with that trial comes a reward, and that reward is going to be seeing the faces of those people being affected, however they respond, because you can't. I don't even know how everyone's going to take it, and sometimes I feel numb to it. I've been around it so much, and I've read the word so much, and I've read the text so much. It's going to be interesting, even in the run at school, it's going to be interesting to speak these words and have people hear them for the first time and be affected for the first time. And then when you get out there in those schools, when they respond, like students respond, and they will let you know how they feel. And so it's being on that chopping block is terrifying, but exhilarating. So I'm excited. I'm really pumped, man. It's gonna be tight. I was having a dinner with my roommates, and one of them was telling a story about a YouTube video that he saw, and he was like, "Yeah, man, this guy was like this," and he was like, "Nigga, this," and I stopped, and I just stared at him. I was like, "We are not in Splittin the Raft rehearsal. This is not okay. Like, this is not. I mean,
there is a finite space, you know.
Yes. I feel like the word means a lot, and it's really interesting. There are so many schools of thought when it comes to the word nigger, because you have people that are like nigger, and then it's like nigga, and then you got niggas, you know, all these different things, and you have people that have taken the word and they like how women were called bitches,
Right.
and how a lot of like women take that. A lot of people, like some women that I know of, take that and they own it, and it becomes a place of pride. Same thing as homosexuals. Some of like the derogatory term that was coined to them was faggot, and then so I've heard some homosexuals have taken that, and it becomes something that it becomes a source of pride. They take that word and they flip it, and it becomes something that they define, not society. And I honestly, I don't necessarily know how I feel about it. There are some times when I feel affected, really affected. I remember the first time I heard the word, I was in a school bus in 2nd grade, and a friend of mine called me a nigger, and I jumped up and grabbed him by his shirt and jacked him up against the bus. I didn't even know what the word meant. I went home and asked my dad, what does this mean? And so that could have testimony to the fact that it's something behind the word. It's what it's filtered through that makes it poison. But you can't deny that it is what it is.
Right.
You can't. I mean, I can't go. I can't go out and. This show has made me aware that I can't go out and just say it without realizing what I'm saying. Right. I have friends who joke around, and I've joked around before and been like, man, nigga. You know, I've joked around like that. But what this show has done is it's made me take a step back and go, whoa.
Yeah.
When I'm saying that, what am I saying? Like, because the word seems this small, but its history is here.
Yeah.
And massive. So you can't you can't use the word without denying the history that it has.
Right.
You are aware of that, or at least now I am. And so yeah, I appreciate the fact that in rehearsals we're addressing it head on, and that we address it, we use it because it's necessary. And it is uncomfortable sometimes to everyone. It's uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable in the beginning for me for some reasons, and it's uncomfortable for Harrison for some reason. It's uncomfortable for Shannon for some reasons, and Rob and Annie, and yeah, it's potent.
Yeah.
It's a really potent word.
Yeah.
And I feel like the first time that it's said in here, the energy is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
The first time it's said at every place we go to, the energy is going to shift, and every single time we say it, the energy is going to shift. I wouldn't be surprised if people shift around in their seats. It's going to be interesting to have black people and white people and all these different people who are aware somewhat of this. Some people are aware like only I can say it, or some people are like I can only say it in this context around these people. But to have it in a public forum said, brought out into daylight, it's like that thing that's always swept under the rug.
Right.
And people have to confront it. And so the questions after the show are going to be really interesting.